Right, just some last minute attempts to get a cabinet member to join us on Zoom, but I think we might be resolving that in due course. So welcome everybody to Cabinet today on the 9th of February. I'd like to start by welcoming Paul Martin, our interim head of paid service, to his place, and also to offer a vote of thanks to Judith Finlay, who has been last minute attempts to get to join us. We might want to turn that. There we go. Bit of feedback. Judith, we were so rudely interrupted by myself offering you a vote of thanks for stepping up into the role of interim head of paid service for the last month and a half. So if Cabinet has agreed, I think we should thank her for that service, and welcome back to your role as Executive Director of People. Yeah, good. All right. Let's get going. Apologies for absence. We do have Councillor Mahfouz, who I believe is isolating, but he's with us on Zoom. I think Councillor Costigan is attempting, he's giving us a wave. Hello, Councillor Mahfouz. I believe we do have Councillor Costigan attempting to join. Apart from that, I think we're all good. Declarations of interests. None. Okay. There are, of course, confidential matters within appendices of the various different reports. We don't intend on considering any matters in private, but if you do wish to go onto the gold papers, please do indicate in order that we can turn off public access. And of course, as always, I'd strongly encourage you not to do that, please, if possible. So, as always, masks on if you're not talking, and we'll get through this evening. So, first and foremost, items for decision, minutes of the last meeting, are they agreed? Agreed. There are no appointments to subcommittees and outside bodies. So, Councillor Donnelly, the budget strategy, medium-term financial strategy for 2023 onwards, 2022-23 onwards.
Thank you. I'll try again. Thank you, Chair, and apologies in advance for the amount of my voice that the meeting will get for the rest of the evening. Some of you have had to listen to me say this stuff quite a number of times already, so I hope you'll all bear with me. So obviously the purpose of the paper is to seek the support of Cabinet to take these proposals for approval of the budget and the council tax position for the next financial year at the forthcoming full council meeting. Worth, I think, just briefly taking a step back to work out where we've come from in coming to where we are. We still face unprecedented demand as a result of COVID and the ever-escalating pressure on our adults and children's social care services and on our housing provision. During the pandemic, the borough stepped up with its COVID hardship fund worth over £2 million for low-income families. We provide over £30 million in council tax support to our most vulnerable residents, up to 100% for those with a weekly income below £124. And we distributed 14,000 emergency food parcels. We're painfully aware that as a result of events elsewhere in the economy, inflation is hitting people hard. We've moved very quickly from a position of almost historic zero inflation to an inflation rate that you almost have to be as old as I am to remember when we last had these sorts of rates. But we have to be able to deliver on our residents' priorities, reducing inequality, creating good jobs, and tackling the climate crisis. And that means taking difficult decisions as ever in this budget process. But we'll continue to prioritise vulnerable and low-income residents in the face of a cost of living crisis through our council tax support scheme and our continuing commitment to keep council tax low. With inflation as high as it is, above 5%, heading for 6%, And with nobody really, I think, at the moment knowing where it's going to stop, we're in a situation where, unlike in previous years where there were economic problems around the community, we're not in a position to absorb the cost rises that we have without it causing more problems to the community in which we live. We have to meet our own obligations, and we will have to take some steps through the measures available to us to try to keep pace with the rising cost of living. In addition to that, the council tax increase proposed here, 1.99%, and the social care precept of 1% are increasingly effectively baked into the financial planning that central government does for local government. If residents would examine the government's projections through the local government finance settlement, all of its calculations work on the assumption that councils take the maximum available to them. They call this core spending power, as if it was money they were giving to us, when in fact it's money that they assume that we must pass on by way of an increased council tax charge and social care levy. It would be fair to say that local government finance has never been in a more unpredictable and unstable situation. Funding is insufficient, it's unreliable, and it's unpredictable. Councils around the country are competing for smaller pots of, ever smaller pots of money to fund business as usual spending. And we have to make difficult decisions now to build up reserves to ensure resilience in the face of the unexpected. And if we didn't know what the unexpected was before, we certainly know what the unexpected looks like now. The majority of the growth pressure we face still stems from adults and children's social care. And even after all these years, we await meaningful proposals from the government on the reform of social care and proper funding of the NHS. And in the meantime, councils have to foot the bill. What happens at the moment is that the government, through this settlement, which arrived in the middle of December, leaving us around 6 weeks to put these proposals together, a series of one-off grants, non-recurring grants, grants that we had been led to believe would no longer happen, but have been unexpectedly continued. It's not a basis upon which we can make meaningful planning. And as I say at every quarter when we present this paper, the notion of a medium-term financial forecast for local government is currently almost a joke. One of the consequences, and these grants, I will recognise, these grants amount to slightly more than we had expected we would get. So we are slightly less worse off than we thought we would be. But the impact, because of the way in which they've been paid, the way in which these are one-off payments, is that the immediate effect on our medium-term financial strategy for the next 3 years has been to hugely increase our projected deficit, because we can make no assumptions that these payments will recur. So, having said that, having made reference to the council tax increase proposal of 1.99%, which we wish we did not have to do, but we do, I would point Cabinet to the fact that we have very substantial increases in investment in this budget. We have made also very significant cuts in this budget, again, in order to make room. And particularly draw reference to the 3.7 million we specifically set aside to boost the council's reserves and resilience in the face of the unexpected for the coming years. There are, of course, an enormous number of attachments to this paper. There are a huge number of spending lines. I will, I think, pause there to allow colleagues the opportunity to ask any questions that they wish to do.
I have been, thank you very much, Councillor Donnelly. I have been notified of questions from Councillor Malcolm, who I will take first.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. First of all, let me thank the officers for their briefings over the last 12 months and more. They're always very helpful as to where the council is moving forwards to. There has been a lot of changes over the last couple of months in these documents that we've been looking at. I've got a couple of areas that I just want to explore. The first one relates to the Newton Europe consultancy, which I think appeared 3 or 4 months ago in Cabinet. That looks to have saved quite a lot of money and worked as an actual sort of mechanism. Does the portfolio holder think that would have been better if that type of work had been done a few years ago? Because those savings could have happened a few years ago, and those millions that may be saved will ease some of the pressures that he's referred to earlier. And then secondly, are you looking at any other types of consultancy across the span of the council to look at areas, not so much at saving money, but at areas such as service delivery, improving service delivery, where that can be done without costing more money? And then the last question and point goes back to something that's happened recently with the sudden announcement by the Chancellor, which looks to mean that about 50,000 of our residents who will get this £150 fuel bill grant, as I think it's called, but are not on direct debit. Can you sort of comment a little bit in terms of what's the problems that will cause you and the administration in administering that, and what are you doing to inform residents and tenants as the details of it become known?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Malcolm, and thank you for noting the success of the savings that came from the Euro thing. I do appreciate it, because we did have a conversation at a previous cabinet, and I'm genuinely impressed that you would acknowledge the actual outcome, because I committed that it would save money, and thank you for recognising that it has. As far as consultants elsewhere, I mean, I guess what do you call a consultant? I mean, we engage consultants for particular purposes, large and small, around the organisation. Later in the agenda, you'll hear from me again around the digital strategy. At the core of that is a report we commissioned from a consultant who's expert in that field. So I think wherever you look, the organisation seeks to be, I think, wise enough, and I've used this in the past, humble enough to recognise where its own expertise or resources may be insufficient to push through to deliver the best result. I think it's beyond the realms of the hypothetical to ask whether a particular set of consultants should be brought in earlier, because the world wasn't the same then. We wouldn't have been asking the same questions, and we were in the process of making earlier sets of savings. One of the reasons that we're bringing in certain types of people now is that there is no low-hanging fruit. The fruit's all very near the top of the tree. And there are some specialist people who are better at getting near the top of the tree, perhaps, than we are. So I think we recognise that, and we make the best use of the expertise that's available out there. Thank you.
And did you want to comment on the 150? I mean, the administration of the 150.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, in terms of the administration of it, I'll perhaps ask Ross Brown, because he's the one who'll get the headache. It won't cause me a headache, other than perhaps in terms of emails that I and colleagues might receive. It's very hard, with the best will in the world, it's hard to look at this and see it as other than primarily a gimmick. We have been presented with a situation that was not explained to us in advance, and frankly has not really been explained to us very well since. My worry is that the government is seeking to take credit for giving £150 and devolve blame for any difficulty involved in passing the money on. which would be entirely in keeping with its record over the past decade or so. But yes, I mean, clearly there are considerable issues that seem to present themselves for our residents who don't pay their council tax by direct debit, because we can't just ping money into their bank account. But perhaps Mr. Brown could, Chair, with your permission, could amplify.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly, and thank you for the question, Councillor Malcolm. Yeah, as you're aware, we have around 144,000 council tax liabilities within the Borough of Ealing, of which around 102,000 of those sit within the bandings A to D, which the £150 council tax energy rebate, to use its official name, is targeted at providing the £150 support to. You rightly referenced that circa 50% of the 102,000 properties, we hold the details of those individuals from a banking perspective, because those individuals and families choose to pay via direct debit. Unfortunately, for the other 52,000 who choose to pay by other means, i.e. non-direct debit, we don't hold the bank details for those individuals and families. Councillor Donnelly rightly said that we're a little bit light on detail at the moment as to how to administer the grants that will be passported to us. Our understanding currently is that the individuals or families will need to submit an application into the council for us to then verify and check, with a view to us then making those payments as soon as practically possible. Now, that's not such an issue for an authority with our size until you start to talk at the scale which is in the 52,000 region, which is going to provide us some significant administrative challenges, not least from a check-in process before we then get into administering such bank transactions. And this is before we get into the more trickier areas, such as where joint liabilities exist, where individuals have moved out of properties, and where indeed individuals have moved into the borough within the existing financial year. So we're still to receive the detailed guidance from the Department of Levelling Up and Communities. And as soon as we do that, we will work quickly to issue as clearer communications as we can and provide as much support as possible to families and individuals in the borough to allow them to apply for them grants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've put you all on notice. We are going to adjourn the meeting in 10 minutes just to allow the technology to reboot. A slight technical hitch, but of course, I will take, unless you wanted to come back on anything, Councillor Donnelly. Anything
No, nothing.
All right, no, fine. In that case, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Leader. As is traditional, I'll keep my powder dry until the council meeting next month. And just a polite reminder, Councillor Young, this is questions, it's not contributions. I just wanted to ask one question on one of the savings lines, which is line FE12208, which is to do with controlled parking zones. Part of that saving is from converting some of the parking bays into pay by phone usage. Can I ask how you reconcile that saving with the stated intention of the council to reduce car use, in particular commuting car use?
Well, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation. Councillor Young will be aware that we have conducted this exercise before with a limited number of identified spaces. The operation, it was a successful enterprise. It doesn't, in our view, and Councillor Costigan may have something, if she can beam in from online, it doesn't represent any significant contribution to adding to the carbon. If the government would wish to fund us properly, then we wouldn't possibly be looking imaginatively at ways in which to raise more money, Councillor Young, but it doesn't. We do, and we are.
Sorry, a 6.32% increase in core spending power isn't funding properly.
Sorry, Councillor Young. So, through the chair, Councillor Donnelly's made his contribution. I normally wouldn't take supplementary questions. This is so. If you do you have supplementary questions in relation to this or any other matter? Okay. So that being said, Councillor Costigan, did you indicate to come in at this point?
I think probably Councillor Donnelly has covered it, but I think maybe just to say that these shared use parking spaces are only in areas where we have ascertained that there is capacity. So basically the spaces aren't being used, they're just sitting there. And they're mainly in, places like flank walls, so not outside people's houses, places like that. So they're not being used at the moment. And as Councillor Donnelly says, we have gone through this exercise before. So it's just about identifying a few more of those sort of spaces that could be helpfully used either as CPZ parking, so you can still use it if you've got a permit, or as parking for other people, including other residents of the borough.
Okay. Thank you very much. With all of that being said, and conscious of time that we have left on the clock before we need to adjourn, I'll direct Cabinet to the recommendations set out in the report from 1.11 to 0.120. These are, of course, recommendations that Cabinet is being asked to refer effectively to for Council ahead of the budget meeting that I believe, memory serves me correctly, I can't remember actually, but it's very soon, next Tuesday, 1st of March, there you go. Are those recommendations agreed? Okay, thank you. So we will adjourn the meeting now for hopefully no longer than 5 minutes. So we stand adjourned.